啦，各位
Members, let's call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda.
議程嘅第一項呢，就係通過會議記
Confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the fourth meeting on the 21st of April 2017 have been forwarded to members. So far, the Secretariat has not received any proposed amendments. May I invite members to confirm the minutes? If there are no questions, let's move on to the next item, update on the development of Xiqu Centre. I'll invite the administration and the WKCDA in.
我咪應該用呢支啊。我咪應該用呢支啊，但係呢支唔係好長咁。好，得。好，咁我歡迎呢今日呢政府當局。
Let me welcome representatives from the administration and the WKCD authority. We have from the Home Affairs Bureau Deputy Secretary Ms. Angela Lee, Mrs. Soraya Lee, and the CEO of WKCD authority, Mr. Duncan Pascott, and his team. I'll now invite the administration and the WKCDA to briefly walk us through the paper. Thank you, Chairman. At today's meeting, we'll report two developments of the cultural facilities at the WKCD, which is Xiqu Centre for this item and the Lyric Theatre Complex for the next item. We'll brief members on the latest situation of the hardware and software development. Maybe I'll now defer to Mr. Duncan Pascott, CEO of WKCDA, to brief you on the update.
I'm going to start setting the scene, and then I'll ask Lewis to take us through the more detailed part of the presentation. I think it's important, let's start where it is. This provides the gateway at the eastern end of the district. As you can see, the construction is well advanced now, and indeed the exterior is more or less complete. We're now installing the various fins and the final detailed finish on the exterior. It's, I think, fair to say that we're still very much on track for the occupation permit in November, which will allow us to get practical completion around April. We don't anticipate any delays in that. Obviously, weather permitting, with the weather we've had the last couple of days. As you can see from these slides, the exterior is more or less completed. The roof structure is completed and the mesh is going on. And now we're looking at the finishing on the interior with the subframe installation and the various cladding installations. Work is already started on the theatre, the tea house theatre, and the fitting out for the various common areas. I think the most impressive area really will be the atrium, which will allow us to operate this facility 24/7. Essentially, that will become a sort of common visiting and meeting place within the district. We'll move on to the opening and preparation plan, and I'll ask Lewis to take us through the rest of this. I've already passed it on. It's okay.
I'll speak in Cantonese. We're preparing for the completion of Xiqu Centre, and we are also preparing for the opening of Xiqu Centre, and it will be divided into 3 stages. The first stage will be from the second to third quarter of 2018. After the OP, we will start with technical testing, soft opening, and final preparation. And this will take place between the second and third quarters of 2018, depending on the progress of works. And then at the second stage, there will be an opening festival, which will take place in the fourth quarter of 2018. There will be a grand opening ceremony with special performance and also performances for the public. And there will be a 3 to 4 week public program for public participation, including free activities and also activities with a fee. At stage 3, we plan to have an opening season for about 3 to 4 months. And during the opening season, we're going to host different activities. There will be Cantonese opera performances every month and also other kinds of performances. And the third stage will last from the fourth quarter of 2018 to the first quarter of 2019. And this is our opening preparation plan starting from the second quarter of 2018. At the same time, we're also preparing the Xiqu Centre hiring policy. In the past 2 years, we have been discussing with the sector, and we are close to finalizing our policy. At this moment, we can share with members that there are 4 major guiding principles. First, it should be artistically driven. That is to say, for the artistic programs, we will assess the programs on the category or the level of artistic elements, and also for Xiqu performances, there will also be a set of assessment criteria, so that we can provide or give priority to quality programs. The second hiring principle is that we would like to maximize the use of each space. That is, for different spaces, if the program allows different uses, then it will be given priority. Third principle, it will be user-friendly and flexible and responsive to market changes. For Xiqu Centre and other venues in the future, we hope to adopt a flexible approach and be more responsive to market changes, so as to respond not only to the market and also to users. We hope that a more flexible approach can be adopted comparing to the existing approach in government venues. Fourth principle, we'd like to support longer-run productions. At the moment, we do not have sufficient performance venues in Hong Kong, and it's not easy for artistic troupes to hire venues for the long run, and the Xiqu Centre would be artistically driven. We hope that productions of high caliber and able to carry on for a longer term can be supported. And also we'd like to take into account financial implications. We will gauge market demand and assess market situation and consider financial implications when hiring out our venues. The next slide, apart from the WKCD Board of Directors and the supervisory structure, we are going to set up a Xiqu Centre advisory panel, which will come under the WKCD Performing Arts Committee. It will have a total of 15 members, and it will advise the authority and the committee on the following matters, including the management and operation of the Xiqu Centre, and also in terms of software, strategies and policies for nurturing and training Xiqu talents and professionals. And the panel will comprise some of the existing members of the PAC, the artistic community, as well as relevant management and business experts. We're going to set up the advisory panel so that before Xiqu Centre is commissioned, there will be a panel, an advisory panel dedicated to giving advice to the authority on the software and hardware development of Xiqu Centre. In the next slide, I will talk about the professional development and audience building programs of Xiqu Centre. Over the past 2 years, we have been hosting this Rising Star of Cantonese Opera, and this year will be the 4th, and we will continue to have 5 performances in the Kowloon Centre theatre, and we successfully held the Rising Stars of Cantonese Opera before and nurtured talented young artists. And we also have this team preparing for the commissioning of Xiqu Centre, and they will continue to give performances in the future. This May, we just had 5 performances at the Tea House Theatre Taster, and the performances were given at the Lyric Theatre of the Hong Kong APA, and we invited different guests, and we invited the hotel and the tourism industry on one of the performances for them to express views on how we can better promote the performances to tourists.
We invited students and teachers from schools, and in the future the Tea House Theatre can also provide a venue for schools. So we conducted a questionnaire survey and we received a lot of feedback. One of the highlights of the Tea House Theatre was that we conducted a live internet streaming session, and we also did video on demand, and more than 120,000 people had watched the event on the internet. Third, last year we had signed a memorandum of understanding with the Shanghai Center of Chinese Opera, and it's an agreement for 3 years. So we have events in Shanghai, and this year we'll be inviting the Shanghai different performances to perform in Hong Kong. You mentioned that just now. Last year we had participated in an event. The young Hong Kong directors had put on a performance, and this year in July we also have an event where we invite our Shanghai counterparts. The last point I want to talk about is we are now building a Cantonese opera script archive where we have a database. We will be using internet database to help us develop research facilities, and the Xiqu Centre is a performance venue. So if we can build up a script archive, then our old scripts, they can be renewed or reviewed and updated. That would help us develop. That would conclude my presentation. Okay, thank you for West Kowloon team. I now open it up to questions and answers. Mr. Tan Ji-chun. Thank you, Chairman. Now, previously we had some photographs of Xiqu posted on the internet, and the design was compared to the funding application, and they said that it didn't live up to its expectations. And I understand, Mr. You had explained that to the media. The angles of the photographs were different. It was a back door, and it wasn't completely finished. So I'd like to take this opportunity to allow him to clarify that to the public once again. You understand that the artist's impression and the final version will be different. We understand, but we're worried that even with the final version, the public will still feel that it's a big discrepancy. And the second question I want to follow up on is ticketing prices. West Kowloon, aside from being the operator, they're also organizers. They can run their own shows. So your own shows versus outside applications, what will the ratio be? In 12D, you said you encourage long-term performances. I'm worried about that as well. For example, Tan Boju, Long Kim San, they might be booked for a whole month or a few months. What's the principle for inviting these well-known performers? Okay, West Kowloon, they can respond. When I look at the photograph, I would like to speak on your behalf. We know that some installations weren't complete, but even when it's done, will it live up to the expectations? So perhaps Mr. Pescott?
I'm actually quite pleased to be able to address this point. The designer, as you know, was Bing Tom. Unfortunately, he passed away last year, very sadly. We're building this as much in recognition of his expertise. He saw this as his coming home, and we want to honour that. So I can assure you this design will be implemented as fully as we possibly can. I was very disappointed with those photographs because they really don't show the impact, and I believe some of the members came and saw for themselves previously. It is going to look spectacular. The challenge, of course, at the moment is we still haven't finished the outside. We still have to put on the fins. We have to adjust the final look. When it's finished, I can assure you it will look very close to the design that Bing had in his mind when he designed it. I think it'll be spectacular. Turning to the second question, the proportion of our programming to outside programming will be no more than 10%. It's going to be a very small proportion of the total amount of time available. The issue from our point of view is that we're looking at introducing new forms that perhaps may not be done by the traditional forms here. That 10% will allow us to introduce new approaches. And maybe Lewis can answer the third point.
我簡單回應一下關於長期演出。
Let me respond to the long-term performance. Xiqu or Cantonese opera, it's an intimate art form to the Hong Kong public. So there are a lot of people who want to watch good performances. In the past, Hong Kong had a problem that even if there was a good show that could reach a large audience, they couldn't rent a venue. They might only be able to rent 1 week or 2 weeks, and they had to rent another venue, so they had to move from one location to another. So in our principle, we say we encourage long-term performance, but first of all, the weighting is lower than artistic criteria. It's not because they are big celebrities, they have some gimmicks or whatever, and they can hog the space. It's because they have to have a good artistic merit. So the criteria is being artistic-led. Tanya and I, when we visited the site, the facade, a lot of them installations weren't installed. So I would like to speak up on your behalf, and I do hope that you don't disappoint us. Mr. Yu Siwing, thank you. Just now, the CEO said that the Xiqu has to be self-sufficient. It has to, so the Xiqu Centre, we're spending 2.7 billion. What about the maintenance and depreciation costs? Are these included, or are you just talking about the operating expenses? Do you just need to meet operating expenses? Well, if that's the case, then it seems, how do you define the standard for being self-sufficient? You also want to set up a consultant group, and in the future, will you be outsourcing the venues, or will West Kowloon Authority have its own team to manage the management? Third question is, you said you would utilize the space in the venue. Do we have F&B and souvenir shops? And when you sell souvenirs, have you done a study on the manufacturing of souvenirs? So, will the souvenirs be part of your income, or will you just outsource it? West Kowloon, Mr. Pescott.
The point about self-sufficiency really applies to the whole district. Honestly, if you look at the individuals, theatres generally don't make money. That's a fact. Museums tend not to make very much money at all. So we have to offset essentially the expensive and costly operational side by the income we can derive from the other elements within the district. So we're looking at it across the whole district. We're not looking at it on a venue-by-venue basis. And that's very important because in order for us to be successful, we do want to run all of the facilities at the high standard that we've been asked to do. and that is something that we are programming to do. In terms of the overall operating expenses, yes, that will have to be paid for by the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority, and it's been budgeted. All of those budgets are submitted to the Legislative Council every year, and the next one will come in shortly, and you'll be able to see that. In terms of the operation, as I said, we'll be operating the facilities, but working with different groups, with different organizations to support their endeavors as well as our own. We do have advisors that have come in, for example, to advise on the restaurants, the dining facilities, etc., and we're going through that process of letting the dining at the moment. Yes, that's an income stream, but of course, it's just one stream. We'll also have income stream from ticketing, from souvenirs, as you said, and that's another area where we're taking expert advice as to what approach we should adopt for that. But frankly, within this facility, we only have a very small souvenir outlet, and it's something that we're looking at the moment. The rest of the F&B and retail is also being looked at the moment. So there will be a range of different restaurants, obviously themed within the context of the Xiqu Centre. There'll also be a space for sort of cha-chan-teng type operations, as well as more regular Chinese restaurant type operations. So there'll be a whole cross-section of different uses within the building, as well as temporary opportunities. I touched earlier on the question of the atrium. We will be able to set up temporary marketplaces, etc., within the atrium space, and we're looking at that as well.
The question about future operations, will it be outsourced or will it be handled themselves?
That's what I said.
Ms. Lau Xiu-Lai. Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to hear that the authority has outlined 5 principles where they will utilize the space, and they will make it convenient to the audience and users. Well, I'd like to go into deeper detail, because in the past, the government venues, compared to other venues, let's say Sunbeam Theatre, they are more rigid and bureaucratic. For example, let's say the government venues, they require advance booking of 9 months. If there are other performing troupes who release the venue, it will not be available to groups. So, but other venues will allow the flexibility, and they will even reduce the rent because there's less advertising marketing time. But the government is rigid. They require 9 months advance application. And if you compare to Sunbeam Theatre, they allow a deposit, and after all the ticketing receipts have been accounted for and paid off, they can pay the balance. But the government requires a full payment up front, so this affects the performing troupes. So I want to ask, will the authority adjust these measures and allow the performance troupes make it more convenient for them? I'll give you further examples. For example, booking of venues. The troupes say they are not aware which time slots are available, which are booked. The LCSD is not transparent. They don't know why their application failed. So the authority, can you make the booking process more transparent, and regarding the rent, could you have a more flexible approach towards rent? I'll respond. Just now, we have considered all the factors you mentioned, and of course I need to wait till the end of the year when we have more details. I can respond a bit more. But first of all, I want to say that if we can have the manpower and you apply and say whether we can rent a rehearsal room, and if I find that it's vacant, as long as I can arrange staff we can arrange for these immediate requests. But of course, if you say if the performance venue, if you want to book that, we need to arrange 20 staff. That might not be we might not be able to respond that quickly, but we do have a flexibility, and we're also considering that some of the venue rent, it can be linked to the ticketing receipts. That means if some troops, if they are new, they don't have celebrity stars, and if we can link the rent to some of their ticketing, that means if they have low ticket receipts, or if they cannot have a full house, they don't have to pay the top rent compared to celebrities or big cast shows, where they can charge high ticketing prices. Having it linked to ticketing receipts is something that we're looking into to allow for more flexibility.
Well, you mentioned making this information available to the public about vacant slots and how we can discuss with the or liaise better with the venue hirer on a ticketing arrangement, and we're working on it. Ms. Tanya Chan. Well, you understand that I also organize some shows, so I understand the thing about venues. First, about longer run productions. In short, I really look forward to Xiqu Centre for a venue that allows longer run productions. It is important. You need to build audience, because for the real celebrities holding performance at APA, there is a really high demand for tickets. But for longer run productions, we do not have sufficient venues, and it's really competitive. I hope that this will be a nurturing ground for, either the real celebrities or emerging talents. Does it mean that there will be a panel for auditions? Are you going to invite them for auditions? How are you going to fulfill this guiding principle A, that is artistically driven? And also, I'm very interested in these matters. About the opening season, 4 to 5 weeks of activities. I would like to know what these are. I don't know when you will let us know and the general public know roughly what the opening season will entail. And also, can you give us a supplementary paper about the facilities in Xiqu Centre and the capacity? Because earlier I recall that there would be a performance venue for over 1,000 audience, and also a tea house theatre, and also DRE facilities. Is there going to be a rehearsal room? Is there any partition? I'd like to have a paper on that. And also about your collaboration with the Yau Ma Tei Xiqu venue. Well, one is managed by the LCSD. This one is managed by you. I want to know whether there will be any complementary function, or is it that you have different positioning? Now, the other point is about the LCSD. Well, I understand that WKCD will be using optics for ticketing arrangement. I'd like to know how tickets will be sold. For optics, it's not really convenient. So a question on the tickets. I want to know whether the WKCD will use its own system, or will it use some existing systems?
We will have our own system. So that's something we're working on at the moment. But obviously we need to be working with the existing ticketing systems in town, so we're talking to them as well. But yeah, for the size of the district, the range of facilities that we'll offer, it makes sense for us to have our own ticketing system. So that's definitely going to happen. So Lewis, do you want to deal with the other points, please?
Let me take the easier question. Opening season. Well, it's going to be the third and the fourth quarter of next year, and after making an announcement, the actual sale of tickets will take place the second quarter after that year. And of course, this year we will be signing contracts with some performing artists participating in the opening season, and by then more information will be released. So please be patient. About the choice of programs, over the past years we have been cooperating very closely with the sector. The first point is that for the advisory panel, it comprises representatives from the sector, and they offer a lot of advice on the choice of programs. And for the WKCD, we're going to set up a system with the art director, with his team, and again, the director will be able to advise us on that. About working with Yau Ma Tei Theatre, apart from Yau Ma Tei, we have the new wing of Kowloon Theatre and other venues. So the government has been developing the performance of Cantonese opera in Hong Kong. I understand that we have different positioning for different venues, for different levels of artists. I'll wait for a second round then, Chairman. So it's my turn. I'm referring to the paper. Basically, the construction progress is in schedule. What about the financial aspect? Is there any cost overrun, or is it within budget? Because we're towards the end of the works. I want to know whether it's still within the 2.7 billion budget. And just now we talk about the 5 guiding principles, one of which is user-friendly, the other is maximizing the use of each space. I am happy to see that a lot of Xiqu performances will be held there. But I want to know, in order to maximize the use of each space, will there be performances not related to Xiqu, say musicals or dramas? Well, I also watched some of the performances in Kowloon Theatre, the rise of the Cantonese rising stars of Cantonese opera, and the Tea House Theatre, and it's the 4th round of the Rising Stars. I'd like you to explain more to members and the public. Is that what you expected? And how many talents have been groomed? And do you think that is effective, Mr. Pascott, or?
I can say, obviously, we won't know the final cost until the project's wrapped up and all of the various issues relating to, contingencies are resolved. But at the moment, we still have contingency available, so we're within the budget that we've set so far. And I don't anticipate that there'll be too many surprises coming forward. Perhaps Lewis can answer the other questions.
Let me respond to the question on maximizing the utilization of each space. For Xiqu Centre, the major objective is to nurture young talents and to support the development of Cantonese opera. Well, if the hiring right is given to, well, of course, the priority will be given to Cantonese opera, but if nobody approaches us on Cantonese opera performances, we will allow other kinds of artistic performances or other community activities, so that different spaces in Xiqu Centre can be used. So it doesn't mean that only Cantonese opera performances can be held in the Xiqu Centre, but they'll be given priority. And after that, other community or community activities and art performances can also be held there, so that we can maximize the use of space. About the Rising Stars of Cantonese opera, it was introduced in 2014. We allowed talented young artists opportunities to to be trained, and it's the 4th round already, and we have more than 20 artists in Cantonese opera participating in the production. And according to them, the greatest difference in the Rising Stars production is that they have ample time for rehearsals. Usually we give, a month and a half for rehearsal. So we're going to send invitations to members of this subcommittee so that you can also enjoy the latest Rising Stars of Cantonese opera in Kowloon Theatre. All right, so when the WKCD sends its invitation, please do go. Second round or first round, Dr. Edward Yu. Sorry, I had another Bills Committee meeting next door. I'd like to hear from the administration. Well, after all, Xiqu Centre comes from a renowned design. It comes from a design competition. I'd like to know whether this experience is a good one using a design competition, or whether the tender system would be better. WKCDA or the Home Affairs Bureau, please.
Sorry, he said he wants the administration to answer. That's the government.
佢想知道
Or he'd like to know whether the tender system would be better, or was it better to have a design competition?
Authority. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Mixed, to be frank with you. We've had some big challenges with this particular construction project. It's not been as smooth as I would like, but we've managed to deal with all of the issues, and I think we're going to have a very good product at the end of it. The trouble with a design competition is that you don't actually control what you get. You have to implement the winner. And the winner may look great from a design perspective, but when you look at the practical application, sometimes much more difficult. So in some cases, a design competition can work very well. In some cases, it's very challenging. I would honestly say this has been quite challenging.
How will you write design in the coming, say, other projects?
Well, I think I've said before, we have different approaches depending on the nature of the project. In some cases, we just do a tender. We write the specifications for what we want. We tender that out to a designer. They answer our specifications. In some cases, we go for an open competition. In fact, we're doing an open competition at the moment for a small pavilion design. But it's intended for young designers, young architects, to give them a chance. So each time we have a new project come on stream, we look at which is the best way to deal with it. And each one can be different.
I exactly would like to have what you mentioned about the nature or the criteria you like, right? Under what conditions you would design to use competition, and on what condition you design to have a single code?
Honestly, it's very difficult to generalize, because you look at each project as it comes along. So, for example, the next project that I would anticipate us developing will be the Exhibition Centre. So that we would anticipate being something along a design and build approach. So we then will specify what we want in terms of the capacity, the size, etc. But we leave the design to the successful bidder. So that's a different approach. As I say, you look at each case and you decide which is the best way to proceed on each case. When we get into the music centre, for example, more technically difficult, because of course you want quality in terms of the concert hall. So you have much higher control over the quality requirements for that. So you adopt a different approach. So as I say, each one depends on the nature of the project.
Would you consider, say, for example, the conceptual design would be by competition, but then on technical design, then they can work together with other architects?
That's a variant on a design competition, of course, but the danger with that is you get a nice looking outside and you get a completely different interior.
Honestly, no, but they can work together with...
Well,
right?
Some of them can. If you're looking at, say, like the museum, Herzog and de Meuron have done a fantastic job, but they have huge experience of designing museums outside and inside. So each one you look at the requirements of that particular project.
I think one thing we need to consider is or whether the outcome of the product is the same as the design. For the second round, Ms. Lau Siu-lai, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 questions. Just now you mentioned 3 venues for Xiqu performances, and I understand that the WKCDA will be reserving space for the performances by young talents. I want to know whether this function will be overlapping with the Yau Ma Tei venue. Well, if you can move the performances in Yau Ma Tei to WKCD, I think that operationally it would be smoother. And a second question about the English translation of Xiqu Centre. Why isn't it Chinese opera? Because even in Shanghai, Beijing, Singapore, it's translated as Chinese opera or Chinese traditional opera.
So why do we have the Pinyin Xiqu Centre? Could there be a better arrangement? Mr. Pescod or Lewis? Well, regarding Yau Ma Tei and our division of labor, well, Yau Ma Tei is a small theater. It's also a refurbished old theater, so there are limitations. And it's near Temple Street, Yau Ma Tei, so they have a very unique community characteristics. So relocating that to the Xiqu would not be the same. I think Yau Ma Tei has its unique training grounds function and a community function. Regarding the Xiqu Centre, I think it would be a grand venue. It would have a contemporary outlook. It would have full modern facilities and F&B. So even if we do have new performers in the Xiqu Centre, they would be more sophisticated and a higher level performance. So we would like to see that division of labor. Regarding the naming, I can tell you that the Xiqu Centre, the transliteration or the Mandarin Pinyin, in the last few decades in the scholarly field, a lot of people have been suggesting that the one reason was that Chinese opera is not the equivalent to Chinese Xiqu. There's a lot of habitual use, but it can confuse. You can confuse that Western opera that is sung with Chinese lyrics, and a lot of people have been differentiating that in the Taiwan Xiqu Centre they also use Xiqu. They don't use Chinese opera. So Chinese opera, for example, in Japan, kabuki, they won't call it a Chinese version of a Western opera. So that's why we chose that. I want to add that I don't have a particular stance that I don't like Xiqu Centre. It's just that the whole Mandarin Pinyin, it should have the tones. You should because when Westerners read that, they might not be able to differentiate that it's Chinese Pinyin. Ms. Tanya Chan, Mr. Pescod mentioned that from design to implementation, there might be obstacles, and we were worried in our site visit. We were worried about the atrium because why can't it be 24/7? Because there are no doors. So during inclement weather, have you been to the site? How will you deal with inclement weather? We mentioned that that's an important meeting point. I agree with that. So I'd like to understand, first of all, how will you deal with inclement weather, rain, and so on? And if it's going to be open 24/7 and there are no doors, and if it's so close to Austin Station, will there be busking? Will you welcome that? They may not be directly related to Xiqu, I also of the view that souvenir shops might be viable. The performance, if it's a good concept and people feel at home, they might be easy prey for these souvenir shops. I'm also interested in the tea shop theater. I eagerly anticipate its operations. So I'd like to understand. In the Chairman, you've also visited the APA. Could you share your experience? You say you've invited students. You also invited the F&B industry, the tourist industry. I'd like to follow up on that.
The atrium is going to be a challenge, quite frankly. I mean, having an open space, but that is the fundamental design that arose from the design competition. So whatever challenges we'll have to overcome. That's the practical reality that we face. The orientation of the doors and the way that the doors have been designed should help us to avoid, too much water ingress, for example, in the sort of weather we're having today. I think the environment should be quite comfortable because it will be shaded full time. There will be a breeze that comes through. The issue of a typhoon, of course, we'll have to deal with that when it happens, and I would anticipate, as with all spaces, having to close that down in that case. But otherwise, the intention is firmly 24/7 operation, so that people can use that as an access. Because bearing in mind there will be a direct link into the Austin Road station, it will be a route we want to encourage people to come through, so it has to be open 24/7. So that's just the reality. In terms of the souvenir shop, I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of potential there, but we want to do it well. We want to do it in a way that is suitable for the site and the quality of what we're trying to do. We want the souvenirs to be quality. We don't want them to be, there'll be a range of prices, but we don't want them to be, sort of less than good quality, shall we say. Perhaps I'll let Lewis deal with the tea house question.
我哋補充點樣利用嗰個atrium 嗰度，即係可唔可以了？
I'd like to understand how you would use the atrium space. The atrium will be a unique space. It's an access to the MTR, and it's also an elevated platform. In the beginning, we will have our own events. That is, we will invite Chinese opera, Chinese symphonies, and we can also experiment with some bazaars. We expect that the atrium will create an ambience, and we do have other consideration, acoustics, traffic flow. We will organize our own events first, and once we find a suitable mix, we will cooperate with performance bodies and allow for more functions. So we do expect a vibrant environment. Regarding the Tea House Theater, we've already run 3 events, and it's suitable for people who have not been to a Cantonese opera performance. If you go to Gosan or Sunbeam, they might not be able to follow the whole 3-hour performance. Tea house events are between an hour to an hour and a half. So for people who have not seen Cantor's opera, the length is appropriate. We have an MC, we have some snacks, but for aficionados, they might feel it's not sufficient. We want to attract a new audience. We want to create a new ambience. People who want to visit the second time on Cantonese opera, they will visit the Lyric Theatre. So aside from tourists, we'd like to invite students and first-time audience. Chairman, I have a suggestion. Let's say you have large events, or you can make it available to the rising stars, and people can enjoy these performances. Mr. Yu Siwen. Thank you, Chairman. Quality and celebrity performances can help attract the Hong Kong public. can also attract tourists. So one of your renting principle will be to support long-term performances. So the definition for a long-term performance, how long does it need to be? And if they can meet that requirement, how do you support them? You say you want to support long-term performances. Will you sponsor them financially aside from policy incentives? I think that is worth exploring. Mr. Pescard.
Lewis can answer that rather technical question.
Louis，
Well, we see that in the rent policy we have 5 criteria. The 5 criteria will be considered. That is, if the rent requirement, if they have the same artistic merit or the same ticketing level and other factors being similar, but one who is going to rent for 3 weeks, the other one is going to rent 1 week, then of course we'll rent it out to the 3-week performance. Cantonese opera in Hong Kong now, they run for 5 days, and every once in a while they might run 2 weeks or 3 to 4 weeks, and that is the length given Hong Kong's supply of venues. So with the operation of Xiqu, we would like to see the 2-week shows can run for 3 weeks and 1-week shows can run for 2 weeks. We're not going to be like Broadway where they run a whole year. We want to take it one step further and allow Hong Kong have a longer run of shows. Well, Chairman, if let's say we have mainland troops, very well-known troops, and they want to rent, you have to balance that with a local interest. So will you, if they want to rent for a long term, will you yield under pressure and not rent and say why you're favoring overseas troops versus local troops? In this respect, we have a consensus with a local performance organization. When we decided to establish the Xiqu Centre, we were aware this was a Xiqu Centre, not a Cantonese opera center. We want to be a very inclusive organization. So for local and mainland performers, when you compare the two, we have to consider the artistic merit and the artistic achievement. So we won't be rejecting outside applications. I have a simple question I'd like to ask about the Tea House Theatre. Will it be operated by West Kowloon Authority? My experience, as you said, it's not a long performance venue. You might have different performances, so you need to manage your own performance portfolio. And I had also answered the survey questionnaire. What are your ticketing ranges? So, Louis, the Tea House Theatre, it's for new audiences. So we would like a 1-week performance, 6 to 7 shows, so we can give them 1 or 2 days for outside applications. So the Tea House venue will be mostly our own productions. We have a small troupe to handle. Regarding ticketing, we have different feedback. The people who have never seen an opera performance are willing to pay more, but for regular attendees, they want to pay less. Okay, do we have any more questions on this agenda item? Then we'll move on to the next item. That is update on the development of Lyric Theatre Complex. We also... Do we have other officials? Or they're all here? Okay, then let's welcome the government officials and the West Kowloon Authority. And we can now go through the presentation on the Lyric Theatre. We need to wait for the architect, the consultant. Okay, let's invite Mr. Pescott.
Well, the colleagues are just settling down. Introduce the paper. This paper basically is intended to update members on the latest situation with regard to the Lyric Theatre complex. As you can see, the location is adjacent to the M+ museum at the western end. So this is the other end from the Xiqu we were talking about earlier. Of course, it's related to the application for the basement funding, the PIW work, without which we can't take this forward. But we would like to introduce the sort of concept and the intention. And I'd like to invite Bernard to take us through this presentation. Thank you, Bernard. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chan will do it.
Chairman, members, good morning. Let me first brief members on the location of the Lyric Theatre Complex, LTC. It is to the east end of the M+ Museum. We have the Artist Square to its north, and to its south, it's close to the waterfront promenade, which will allow us a good vista of the harbour. And then to its west, in fact, there is another public square. The majority of public will reach the Artist Square from the Kowloon station through the Artist Square Bridge to the LTC, while some members of the public will access the LTC via the west gate for the loading and unloading area. And there's also another from entrance from the other side to the LTC. In the future, there will also be another entrance on the south side of the LTC near the waterfront promenade. Apart from the three major theatres, we also have a number of RDE facilities, retail, dining and entertainment facilities. And they are scattered at the three locations. To its north, basically serving visitors at the Artist Square. To its south, we have, again, the bars and restaurants, so that visitors at the waterfront promenade can use those restaurants. And also, next to the Pocket Square, there is a lift that goes to the RDE upstairs. For visitors and the public, they can make use of the dining facilities whilst enjoying the view of the Victoria Harbour. Now, as far as the design of the LTC is concerned, we have L1 contract, which includes the basement, including the loading bay, and drop-off points and ramps, and we also have the Lyric Theatre, and the loading bay will need to be connected to the stage of the Lyric Theatre, and that is why the Lyric Theatre will need to be designed in such a way as to connect to the loading bay. And for the main portion, it's also situated, or the foyer, it will have to be connected to the road, so that during intermission the public can go out and enjoy the view. And also we have outdoor terrace on top for visitors to enjoy the view. And on the north side, we have an RCC, Rest and Company Centre, that provides a link to the Artist Square. Now, for the project overview, we have a central alley that allows access to all three theatres as well as RDE facilities. The whole layout is in accordance with our plan. We have the central corridor or the internal alley. At the same time, we also have two smaller passageways. So all in all, we have 4 different ways to access the LTC. Now this is the exterior when you view from the Artist Square, and you can see the exterior of the north facade. On top there'll be a rehearsal room and also the RCC. And the public will be able to see what's happening in the RCC. And then on the ground you can see the main entrance. This is also the outlook of the studio theatre, and you can see that it's quite dynamic. Well, this is the night view from the harbour. We hope that the public will be able to see the whole of the LTC, either from the inside and outside, and also enjoy the view of the harbour. And for each theatre, it comes in different colors so that you can, differentiate the different portions from the foyer. And you can see that this is where the main theatre is. And on the upper floors, you have the RDE facilities. And then on the rooftop, you have the outdoor terrace for the public. Chairman, well, let me then brief members on the software aspect. One major difference of the LTC with other major performing venues in Hong Kong is that we have in the Rest and Company Centre. At the outset, we have included in our design that there would be some professional art troupes resident in the centre, and we have been discussing with a number of dance troupes so that we can arrange for different art dance companies to be resident companies in the complex. Now about the RCC, the objective is a pioneering center for the exploration and development of dance and cross-disciplinary collaboration. And it's also a home for dance companies and artists in Hong Kong. It is also a creative laboratory, meeting place, and performance space for artists from around the world. And the core functions are training, rehearsals, auditions, creation, creative laboratory, exchange, research, performance space, and screenings. And we can also arrange for learning and participation programs, workshops, masterclass, artist talks, work in progress, informal showing, artist salon, etc. And for the artistic positioning, the primary focus is on dance, theatre, and musicals. The secondary focus is on opera or programs for different ages such as children, family. And I'd like to make one point. We have 3 theatres. The largest one is a 1,450 seat theatre. We have a medium theatre of 600 seats. The third one is 270 seat capacity. So we have altogether 3 theatres in the complex. Over the past few years, in terms of software, we have been making plans, and as you can imagine, In the future, these programs will be performed at the LTC in the future. For example, at the end of last year, we had 2 international cultural exchange programs. We signed a 3-year program with Finland dance exchange, and also for the dance company in Melbourne, we also signed a contract. This is a creative meeting point. Each contract will span 3 years, and we will arrange local dancers and artists to go to Finland and to Melbourne. And also, in exchange, we have artists and dancers from Finland and from Australia to help us rehearse and participate in programs. We also have the Producers Network meeting and forum. This is a 3rd year. In the first year, we had 30 participants from all over Asia, and this year we have 75 participants from Asia participating in the Producers Network meeting, and they usually stay in Hong Kong for about 1 week. We have different closed-door meetings and open forums, and we have a lot of opportunities for exchange for them, which is beneficial to the LTC because we are able to connect ourselves with different performance venues, artists around the world, even before the LTC's commissioning. And apart from that, we also have New Works Forum. In 2016, we worked with the multimedia and dance talent Hiroaki Umeda. We had a number of workshops, and we also had some different artists participating in the program. And we also, at the end of 2016, held 2 performances. One is from Taiwan. The other is another exchange program with the choreographer. And you can imagine in the future, these will be the activities in the LTC, such that it won't be just a studio, but we have and also performances, but then we also have resident artists, and it will also be a training ground for new talents and new programs. And that concludes my presentation. Mr. Ray Chen, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to first follow up on some financial matters and works progress. In the paper, it is said that we have 2 contracts, L1 and L2. So perhaps, Chairman, you can remind me, for L2 is the main works contract. In paragraph 11, it said that tender will be scheduled in September for award in March next year. Now, what about the breakdown of the cost estimates? I mean, is it available to the subcommittee? And also for L1, according to the paper, the construction works will be awarded in September this year. At the moment, it is still on the agenda of the Finance Committee. Of course, that means they expect the funding for L1 to be approved before summer recess, so that the works will be in schedule. But have you considered the reality? Well, let's say if the funding is not approved before summer recess, will it have a major impact on your progress, Mr. Pascott?
Sincerely hope it will be approved before the summer recess. I mean, there's no reason why it shouldn't, as far as I can see. It's a very straightforward application. It's very much essential, frankly, if we're to stick to this timetable that we've set out here. We need the basement. Before the basement goes in, we can't start anything on the L2. It's a simple fact. And we did make that clear in the submission. So yeah, I mean, obviously we're looking at what if, unfortunately, the Legislative Council can't vote on this, and we'll be taking contingency plans. But I'm an optimist by nature, and I'm sure members will work hard to get the funding approved. So that's my hope. to be frank with you. In terms of the L2, obviously that's, again, to use that horrible phrase that I know you don't like, it is commercially sensitive because we'll be letting a contract for that. So I'm afraid that information is not available. However, I will say that as far as the design and the foundations are concerned, we're working very closely with the joint venture partners to ensure that the price that we're tendering for falls within the budget that's been set by the authority, and that certainly is the objective. But I'm afraid I can't give you the figures on that at this stage.
Well, Chairman, 2 points. It's not the case that we're blocking L1, but the point is L1 is not even on the agenda because we have Kai Tak Sports Complex. And perhaps if you ask the administration to advance your item for you, then there would be a greater chance. For L2, it comes from your own funding. But if we cannot know what the funding for L2 is, then when we scrutinize the application for L1, we will be asking some questions. So at least you should let us know something about L2.
I recall last year asking how much would L2 cost, and you said you had to wait for the 3-in-1 proposal before you could get the construction costs. So could you give us a ballpark figure, Mr. Pescard?
I really wouldn't like to do that. I don't want to give to the potential tenderers an indication of what we're expecting from them. I think that would be unfortunate for us. I want the best price I can get out of the tenderers. And of course it will depend upon at what point in time we can tender this particular project. One of the realities is if we delay the tender, the chances are the tender price will go up simply because of inflation. So if I give you a price today and it's delayed because of the delay on the L1, it would be well out of perhaps even substantially different. So I respectfully say I don't particularly want to get into that level of detail. Sorry.
Ms. Helena Wong. Chairman, I'd like to ask paragraph 4. The connection to elements and the artistic square, the footbridge. Will West Kowloon Authority use their own funds to build that? Because previously we were talking about the XRL bridge was too expensive. It was hundreds of millions, and it's been shelved. So you will be responsible for this bridge, and
no, that's a government bridge. We're looking at the design. We've listened to members' views. I have to say, and I've said this before, the cost of the bridge is due as much to the problems with the foundations in that location as anything else. The design of the superstructure is relatively a small element of the overall cost. But we're looking at that again, and obviously we'll be talking to government to look at a resubmission in due course.
So that has to go through PWSC and FC, but you don't have the design and the price. Is that the case?
We are looking at the design at the moment, and once we have the design, we'll then price it.
Well, I hope the authority take note, or the government take note, that previously another bridge was shelved because it was too expensive. The design was very good, but it was very expensive. The public had some views. The legislators also had some views. We'd like a practical, good-looking bridge, but we don't want it to end up with like the previous bridge. So we hope that this does not hold up the whole project. So when will you submit your fund? I want to clarify the bridge you're talking about now. That is the previous one. That's the same bridge. It's the same bridge. So I want to clarify that. So do we have to redesign the bridge then? When will it return? There's not going to be a separate bridge. It's the same bridge. There have a lot of bridges. The one we're talking about the same bridge.
Talking about a redesign, and we will not be able to resubmit within this session.
即係而家未知確實嘅。
So you don't know when you're going to return.
But I can say it won't be very different to the first bridge because most of the cost of that first bridge is about the foundations because of the location of the bridge over the MTR line. We have to avoid the line, we have to protect the line, so all of the construction costs related to the foundations is where the cost is. There's just no way to avoid that. The design and the superstructure, the stuff above that, we're looking at, but we're looking at how we can trim the cost where we can, but it won't be substantial, Mr. Chairman.
好，主席，跟住我想問一問咧，就嗱嗰個。
I'd like to follow up on the resident performance group. I want to know the local troops or the APA, they have drama training. So how do you engage local troops and how do you invite overseas troops to be resident troops and how do you conduct the exchange and training? The resident troop, the idea is was formulated together with local performance groups. 5 years ago, we had the local dance troops, the Hong Kong Ballet, modern contemporary dance. They met with us and looked into their development. In the discussion, we formulated the plan to have a resident troop and Hong Kong professional troops will be resident troops where they can do their rehearsal, training, and development. We'll also have short-term arrangements on a project basis with overseas groups, and they can host activities, and they will interact with the resident troop. So regarding local and overseas balance and exchange, since inception, it was already under discussion. So the Hong Kong performance troops are in eager anticipation. Could you invite them to, could we ask them to provide us with a name list? Which performance troops will be part of the resident troops? Do you have a list? Well, regarding the resident troops content, we have already discussed with the majority of Hong Kong troops regarding which group will be shortlisted. We haven't finalized that yet because we haven't even set the opening date in which year. So when we have further news, we can update you in this meeting. Ms. Tanya Chan. The L2 contract involves a lot of things, the promenade, the open space, the AC basement, car park, the public infrastructure. So the GFA, how much are we talking about? I would like a breakdown if possible. How about how much for the performance venue? Mr. Pescard, do you have the figures?
It's for the Lyric Theatre. So it doesn't involve the promenade, it doesn't involve the Artist Square or anything. It is just the Lyric Theatre.
哦，咁請問你講緊嘅 GFA
So what's the GFA we're talking about? This, you should have this basic information.
.好，唔該晒。咁主席啊，其實咧，我
Sometimes West Kowloon software is important. We also have to pay attention to how money is spent. The feeling I get now is that West Kowloon is flush with money. Previously, they might have to apply for 20 billion funding. Now they have development rights and they have developers working with them for 50, 30 years. So aside from PRH, BOT, we need to look into that. So now they have money, and when we talk about price, they don't need to negotiate with us. I have asked for the financial arrangements, and I said that in 2007, 2008, they were asking for 18 billion, and now they're saying that we can't disclose this, we can't disclose that. So how can we monitor the finances? So, Chairman, in the next meeting, will we have a financial analysis or anything about the financial arrangements? Chairman, I would like to talk about the Lyric Theatre because, as Mr. Tajiji said, it's now a 3-in-1 facility. I recall the M Plus building, some space could be provided. I'd like more detailed information, but first of all, I need to understand the financial arrangements. So will we have an opportunity regarding their current plans, including the Palace Museum, the operation expenses, whether the ticketing, whether it's we should have access to that information. Before we had a similar exercise for the third runway. And now West Kowloon, they did one financial arrangement exercise 10 years ago, and now 10 years down the road, there are so many things in flux. I think it's reasonable to ask them for a financial analysis. First of all, I don't know if the board of directors have asked for that. And we have Mr. Pescott here now, so within the future, can he provide some of this information? So the next CE will see this project through, and then the new CS will be Mr. Matthew Cheung. So we need to have a grasp of the financials. It's very reasonable for the Hong Kong public and legislature. So Mr. Pescott is already working on that?
I think the first point I should say is that we're not flush with money. That's part of the challenge that we have. In future, if we're able to develop the site, then yes, there may be an income stream from the hotel, office and residential development. But quite frankly, at the present time, we don't have that income stream. Until we get the basement built, we won't have that income stream. So it's all like a jigsaw puzzle. Every bit is built upon each successive part. What I will say is that in the context of the budgets that have been briefed to the Legislative Council on a number of previous occasions, the construction of the Batch 1 and Batch 2 facilities, which includes the Lyric Theatre, M+, etc., the total budget for that is about 17.8 billion, and that budget is not changed. We're working within that budget. It has been the budget, I think, for about 5 years, something like that, and we haven't changed the budget, and that will cover both Xiqu, Lyric, M+, etc. So that's the overall budget that we're working with at the moment. And it comes out of the $21.6 billion that government granted us back in 2008. Of course, the 21.6 also covers additional funding for operational cost, for acquisition of the collection for the M+ Museum, and longer-term renovation costs. There's an element for that as well. But that has not changed, and that information members have had I think 3 or 4 times now. The issue of what happens as we go forward is something that obviously depends on our ability to get the basement built, because every single facility in the district is based on the building, on the basement. And until we get that approval, we can't do anything. We can't even build the Lyric Theatre, I'm afraid. That's the reality.
Well, before you had the funding of 21.6 billion, you're now saying you can't build, whether you don't know whether you can have the Lyric Theatre because you don't have the basement. So it all boils down to the 17.8 billion. So you say that you have provided the financials for 3 or 4 times, but in 2007 you presented the information in batches. So why don't you have the information now? What you could provide back then, why can't you do that now? And of course I'm asking you for a full list. You need a basement, and then your hotel, your residential building, everything can be built. You can even build a grand bridge. So why do we have everything presented in a piecemeal basis? Chairman, I think my request is reasonable. With the third runway, they are doing land reclamation, and yesterday we had a meeting, and they said they could present the information after the board meeting. So why doesn't the board ask for financials? So if you don't have the overall figures, how can you proceed with development rights? So whether you want to boost your cash flow or whatever, you need to have a set of figures. I think that is very reasonable. In each meeting, I will make that request. I will follow up in the second round regarding the facilities and West Kowloon and so on. I will follow up.
Of course, I'm very happy to resubmit the papers on the 17.8 billion. That's been done 3 or 4 times. I can recycle the paper for you, no problem. And in addition to that, as members are well aware, we do table our budget every year in the Legislative Council for members' information, and again, that will be coming forward shortly. So we're quite happy to provide the information requested.
主席，我好公道嘅，我睇晒佢嗰啲。
Chairman, I'll be fair. Let me just read everything from him, and then I will ask other questions. Well, I asked 100 questions. I just got a 12-page answer, but I will further pursue the questions. About the budget, about the estimates, you can just give us the information again, right? And also about the financial arrangement, when will you come to explain to us, Angela? Thank you, Chairman. Well, after announcement in the policy address, we already briefed the subcommittee, and we explained last time that for the enhanced financial arrangement, we have a framework. Once it is implemented, we will need to sign the contract, and then there will be details. And then before that, we can come back to brief members on it again. So when roughly will it be about the financial arrangements? Perhaps at the end of this year. Dr. Edward Yu. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on the question of design and procurement, because for the last item, I talked about a design competition. So I'll see for this one. In terms of design and procurement, can you share your experience with us? In particular, whether the design suits the software in the future, we can compare the 2 cases and see from your experience which way works better in meeting your requirements. Mr. Pascott.
And then I'll pass on to the design team to sort of give you their view, which I think is only fair. The process, I think, is iterative. We work as closely as we can with the design team to ensure they deliver on what we regard as the requirements. So they come up with a design, we look at it, we give our comments. It's a backwards and forwards process. And in that, we're looking at, obviously, the design, the quality, the facilities that we need, the range of access requirements, etc. And we're looking at the cost, because the two are related. We have a budget, we intend to stick to the budget, there's no scope for exceeding the budget. So as we develop the design, it goes up and it comes back, and it goes up and it comes back, and it reaches the budget. And that's where we are at the moment. We're still working to ensure we reach the budget. I think it's been a positive process. We're not there yet. It's still ongoing. But within the time frame that we've set out here, I think we should be able to move forward to release the tender for the construction of the L2 tender. Obviously, that's then part of it. The next stage, when we move from design to implementation, also involves a process of interaction between the designer, the contractor, and ourselves. And that's the next stage that we're looking forward to. But we're really just at the finalized design stage. So, Bernard, do you want to comment on this?
Chairman, in terms of the design process, the design team and the users, as well as groups like the disabled groups, we discuss with them on a design, and in the process, we also look at the cost implications, and we opt for the most cost-effective design. in order to strike the proper balance between cost and design? Well, first of all, my first question is this a design competition? No. So my question is whether you can compare this with the design competition for Xiqu Centre and compare your experience. In design and procurement process, I want to know whether if you use a design competition, it will be easier or more difficult, whether it will be better. Like Mr. Pascott said, just now said, is it more difficult in meeting the technical requirements? For the LTC, in terms of its design and procurement, the way this is done, comparing to the last item, using design competition, I'd like you to compare the experience. Mr. Pascott.
It is very different, to be honest with you. There are elements that are similar in the sense that both were joint ventures, both involve local and overseas partners. Obviously, that changes the dynamic of the relationship between us and them. I think the nature of the design competition means that we had less control over the look of the facility, but we still worked hard to get the facilities to the standard we want. So, for example, in the Xiqu Centre, the theatre is raised for practical reasons, but it's a fundamental part of the design. Would we have chosen to have a raised theatre had we done it through perhaps a tender approach? Probably not. But that's the nature of the design. In this case, of course, we've gone the other way. We've buried the main theatre to deal with the issue of the basement for direct access. So we have different issues that we're addressing. But that meant that we could say, no, we don't want this issue of having to lift sets and scenery and patrons and everything up 40 metres. We want much easier access. So it was a different approach. I think the outcome in both cases will be a perfectly manageable, perfectly functional, and actually in both cases, a wonderful facility for its purpose. But the process is different, and therefore the issues that we have to address and how we address them are different.
So am I correct? You are saying that you have a stronger say in this project of the outlook?
Well, yes, I would say that, you know, essentially we've worked closely with the designer to come up with the outlook and the content.
Okay.
We're not given a design that has the outlook already set. So there's
OK 好，咁嗱，我都即係簡單一。
I also have a question. Basically, on the financial arrangement, I think this is close to the hearts of members. And just now, the administration and the WKCD authority have given their answers. We look forward to some information. And about the resident companies, I want to know that whether they will be rotated on a regular basis. For how long will they be resident? Is there any set of criteria? And apart from outlook, you know, the hardware, what about what's happening inside? We have new technologies for performances, for example, for the APA, new wing. They have introduced different new technologies such as 3D and digital technology, etc. I want to know whether the latest technologies will also be incorporated in the LTC, because in the future, if you add, you know, those later in the future, it may be more complex. So 2 questions on the resident companies and on the technological aspect. Louis? Thank you, Chairman. About the resident companies arrangement, we are discussing with the sector. I mean, in principle, the resident companies should be a long-term arrangement, but it doesn't mean that we cannot have an entry and exit arrangement as to how long the period of residence should be to make it effective. And we're still discussing with the sector, but we also need to have a periodic review. We're still discussing, but basically this is a long-term arrangement. As for your question on technology, when we designed the Xiqu Centre, we already took this into account. Many digital technology is having an impact on the on-site performance, such as screen projection and other digital performance, digital technology. We have incorporated the technologies in the design of Xiqu Centre because we have a digital backbook that connects a digital signal with other venues. For example, the visual signals, meaning the video recording of Xiqu Centre can be streamed very easily to other venues, or say inside in a park or other outdoor venues, so that we're already providing this link, whether or not we have any changes in the future. Well, you should bear this in mind because in the future the partitions may change. And also about the resident company center, I'd like to ask about the mechanism, whether there is any panel to assess the resident companies, and also for the exit and entry arrangement. Well, you told me that you are discussing with the sector. We'd like to have more information on this because we need to keep a close eye on it as well. For example, if a company is resident for a very long time with only so-so popularity, then I think that we also need to safeguard the WKCDA because perhaps because you signed an agreement with them, and there should be a review and entry-exit mechanism to avoid disputes. Right, thank you. Ms. Tanya Chen, Deputy Chair, second round. Thank you, Chairman. I'm reading the paper once again. For the L2 work package, well, I'm reading paragraph 10 once again. I have highlighted them. For the L2 work package, well, just now Mr. Pascott said that it only includes the LTC. I want to know what actually that's it.
You're absolutely right. What I said was it's mainly the Lyric Theatre. There are small elements that deal with things like district cooling, which are functionally part of it, but there is a slight extension beyond that.
Okay, 即係我嘅理解。
So my understanding is that for works package L2, it includes the LTC, as well as, the peripheral ancillary facilities. All right.
Those facilities.
好，因為我
All right, because I saw the district cooling system, I thought it's something really grand. But anyway, my next question is this. I understand that if you have a lot of independent studios or theaters, it may not be cost effective. And that is why you take this integrated approach in the LTC. Of course, you decided that in 2015, I understand. But I recall that back then when the authority was just established, because the works area hadn't been passed to you yet, you conducted some research on, say, the Black Box Theatre. We're short of these venues in Hong Kong, and also for industrial buildings in Hong Kong, because of the restriction, we do not have a lot of such black box theatres. And that is why you have, a small theater with 400 seating capacity and another one 600, but it's not really as small as a black box. But I recall that there is some kind of rehearsal room or venue, because by the time the whole WKCD project is completed, it seems that we only have one black box theater in supply. So I'd like to know more about the performance venues. Mr. Pascott.
In fact, the honourable member's right. We incorporated two smaller theatres into this complex from what was the CCP. The intention was to bring forward the development. We haven't actually changed the overall number of culture and arts facilities. We've just rejiggled them. At the moment, we are building in the park the free space, which is a black box theatre of 450 seat. We hope to build the 600 seat and 270 seat facilities within Lyric, and thereafter there is at least another two smaller theatres and a medium-sized theatre that's still to come as part of what would have been the third batch. On top of which, of course, we have Music Centre, which will have probably a couple of theatres, and the Grand Theatre. That's just a working title. So there is a lot more yet to come. It's not fixed at this level. And as I say, we are looking at the whole development and not just this work that we're doing now.
主席，我好同意嘅，因為其實可能
Well, I strongly agree, Chairman, because before the WKCD theatres are completed, we're seeing more and more venues in Hong Kong, such as Hong Kong U. It's more like a lecture theatre, but I understand that at least there is a Xiqu Theatre, which is quite good. So we should review the venues available in the market. But anyway, next question. Let's say if the rehearsal rooms are large enough, can we just make it a makeshift venue? Is it possible, Mr. Pascott? Or Monsieur?
An issue of licensing, but we can certainly look at that. For example, adjacent to the Lyric Theatre, there is a warm-up space, which I think is about 200 spaces. Something like that. So there is the capacity. And indeed, within the Xiqu Centre, there's education and lecture rooms. Even within the museums, we have that space. So we're looking at flexible deployment of all those spaces.
Louis 有冇補充啊？
喺戲曲中
In the Xiqu Centre, there's a large rehearsal venue, and we have provided a performance license, and we can take the rehearsal venue and convert it. There's also a large rehearsal center, and we designed it such that it could get a performance license and it can accommodate 150 black box theater. Thank you, Chairman. Did somebody raise their hand just now? If not, then Ho Guan Yu, Junius Ho, your first round. I've participated on and off, and it's hard to follow up on the West Kowloon development. So I just want to ask if you already provided this information, then could you provide it in writing so that we can have a macro view? So we're talking about the development update on Lyric Theatre, how the medium theater, the studio, and Lyric were designed on. I have to rely on the experts, and I fully support that. It's just that the whole West Kowloon has 9 or 10 items. We heard about the Xiqu Centre. There's a medium theater one. There's a music theater, and adjacent to that, there's a great theater. And now we have the Lyric Theatre, and next to that, there's M+. And then Helena Wong mentioned the bridge. And then we have the exhibition center and the Palace Museum that is sponsored by the Jockey Club, which we won't have to foot the bill. So my understanding is that this subcommittee follows up on construction expenditure, and third, whether the facilities comply with our expectations. So if we just look at the progress update, we have some 10 plus items, construction items. So the overall budget, just now, Mr. Pescott said it's hard to estimate because we haven't reached that stage yet, and we haven't got the approval and so on. But we have some 10, 11 items. We should have a preliminary budget. We should have a yardstick. The government had approved tens of billions, and they now have to build 10, 11 items. So we need some reporting or auditing to know how much money we spent and how much time we spent, and when we examine the projects one by one, we can see where we're falling short or progressing in compliance with schedule. So we have 10 items plus the bridge 11 items. We need to know where we are time-wise, schedule-wise, and whether we're on budget, on time. For some items, we don't have to seek government funding because it's going to be funded by the Jockey Club. So do we have a macro view plan that can help us monitor the situation? Otherwise, we're just feeling around in the dark. Thank you, Chairman.
We have, of course, provided an overview previously. That has been provided. I can give that to you again.
Thank you.
That's no problem. Just to remind members, the budget that was set was based on the fact that we know that the original allocation of funds from government was insufficient to build the whole development. So the board set a budget of $17.8 billion for the facilities that we're building, which is the Xiqu plus, on this diagram, the Lyric Theatre, the M+, and the park, essentially, plus the two buildings at the back, the CSF and HOR. We have not funded the rest of the development beyond that. Where the public funding comes in is for the basement, the Artist Square Bridge and other public infrastructure works. Again, all of that has been submitted to the members for information, and as government comes forward to bid for that funds, that is also briefed for members. So again, that information is transparent to members. We also submit our annual budgets to the board, to the Legislative Council, and that will be done probably, I think, in a couple of months. So members have that opportunity to monitor what's going on an annualised basis. And again, on top of that, the Chairman attends the Legislative Council to answer members' questions on the budget. So we do try to provide as much information as we can on the progress of the project as it goes forward. But I will provide you with the overall list of facilities and the estimated delivery time frame for that. But of course, let me stress, those issues, those facilities that are out with the 17.8 have not yet been funded at all. So we don't have a budget for those.
即係多謝主席，容我加多句跟住啫。我多謝阿彭志高先生會提供翻之前。
Yes, I have to thank Mr. Pescott for providing the information. So this is exactly the problem. There's a misconception. People will say that we've already funded some 10 plus billion, but it's not enough. There are other arrangements. They will have land granted for office, hotels, and they can have an income stream from that, and then they can fund the other items. So it will be conducted slowly, but we don't see the full picture. That is the 10 items plus the bridge. We know that it's a 200 million bridge. It's too expensive. So the government should have a budget, even though the funds haven't been deployed. But we should have an estimate of how much the 10 plus 1 bridge will cost. So we have already funded 17.8. So we need to know what the final bill will be. Yes, we've already heard that opinion. Last two questions. Ma Fong Gok, first round. Thank you, Chairman. I have one question in paragraph 13, talking about the artistic merit, and they want to provide a platform for new creation, innovation, and to promote works outside of Hong Kong, to tour around the world. So I want to follow up on that because that is a brand new suggestion. Does that mean that West Kowloon, when the Lyric Theatre is built, I can understand breach of contract, but what about a platform for new works? Who will be developing these new works? Is it West Kowloon Authority? Breach of contract, you will provide a platform for other troops Now, promoting the works to venues outside of Hong Kong. So will West Kowloon do the promotion work as well? And that's because if you just provide a platform for people to develop their works and then you arrange them to go overseas, we can provide a platform. But now you're saying something else. That is, West Kowloon might be promoting the works themselves. So I want to follow up. What's the management's view on this, Mr. Pescod or Lewis? I'll respond briefly. This came about our local and overseas art activities, international conferences, where we saw this trend, especially within the region. In the Chinese-speaking regions, we see a lot of tours, possibilities. Let's say 15 years ago, amongst the Chinese-speaking regions, dance and performance opportunities weren't that great, but now it's more and more ample. So when we take part in the activities, people ask us, our venue functions, aside from being a performance platform, will we do promoting work, and will we introduce Hong Kong works and tour overseas? Because aside from professional troops, there might be small, medium troops where they don't have the administrative or network to arrange for overseas experience performance. So West Kowloon, aside from being a passive platform, we can also do a networking function. So we are exploring this possibility. So that is, aside from being a passive platform, can we make use? Can we invite tours? Could we work with the mainland venues, such as last year we worked with the Shanghai Xiqu Centre? Could we promote Hong Kong Cantonese opera to go to Shanghai? And similarly, if you apply this to dance or drama or musicals, we hope that West Kowloon can be more flexible. We can work with large, small, medium art groups and provide this sort of function. So it's a comprehensive package. So we have a platform function, and we can also do promotion work. Okay. I need to announce that the meeting will have to overrun a little bit because we still have two legislators, and I do have something technical to deal with. So let's invite Ms. Helena Wong and then Ms. Tanya Chan in the third round. I want to follow up on the resident group. I asked for a name list. Which local troops are you in contact with? Now, that's a good idea, but you need to take care of the small, medium troops. They aren't well known. They lack resources. So having venues to rehearse and helping them grow is important. So when you identify resident troops, you need to look after the growing troops. You shouldn't just favor the established troops. And so for the unestablished, they can't pay rent. So how will you handle those? You need a policy on selection criteria. Do they have to share the expenses? And if they don't have money, how will you deal with that? The second question is about I'm confused as well. Aside from the superstructure that have different progress, they have different funding dates. We also have underground works, Mr. Junius Ho, the underground works are also granted in pieces, so we don't grasp the overall picture. So West Kowloon Authority or Home Affairs, if they could give us an above ground and underground plan. And lastly, we know that the West Kowloon district has two items, the Palace Museum and the Exhibition Center. Will it be for artistic use? I don't think so, but we don't have information. I want to ask the Palace Museum, the agreement, will they sign the agreement this month? Do we have a draft of that, and should it be submitted to this committee? And the design, we are aware that the consultant had made a recommendation. Has it been confirmed? Has it, if you've already decided, or if you haven't decided, is there room for consultation? You need to disclose and allow public consultation on the design of the Palace Museum. You also need to come back with details of the Palace Museum, a transparent report.
Progress. It's got a long way to go yet, I'm afraid. And yes, of course, we're very happy to hear comments. Indeed, during the consultation that was concluded a couple of months ago, that was part of the consultation exercise, and as I've said, that will continue. We will obviously be publishing the design when it's at a stage that we feel is appropriate, because obviously we need to be satisfied internally that it delivers everything we need for a museum of that size. So that, I can assure you, we will continue to consult on that. In terms of the exhibition centre, yes, it is intended to be for performances. The intention, and again, we haven't got the design on that, but the outline of what we're trying to do is to have the capacity for a column-free indoor venue for between 10 to 15,000 seats with good acoustics, as well as being able to be used flexibly for exhibitions and other purposes. So it's not just a one-use facility, it has to be flexible. But we're at the point where we're specifying what we want. We haven't got a design, so that's a bit premature. In terms of the overground and underground plans, yes, I can provide that. I'll let you have that in due course. And then the final point is the collaborative agreement. As members are probably aware, we are required, in accordance with the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding, to complete that by the end of this month. So I'm afraid we're still working on it.
好，咁啊，陳淑莊副主席。
Ms. Tanya Chen, Deputy Chair. A very simple question. I am reading from the slide about the inside of the Lyric Theatre. I'm referring to this one. Well, since we have the architects here, on this side, on the left-hand side, there is a light lilac line all the way from right upper corner to lower to left bottom corner, and there's a parallel line. I want to know what this light purple set of parallel lines are. And also for the small theatre, it seems that it's quite standalone. It seems that we'll need to rely on the really extravagant Arthur Square Bridge. And also, does it mean that there is another access? Well, anyway, I see the medium and the main theatre with the RDE, basically they would be jammed together, whereas for the smaller one, studio theatre, and where there would be the Reston Company Centre as well, I'd like to know the access. I can't see a link here. For medium and lyric theatre, I understand the pathway, but what about the studio theatre and also the parallel lines in lilac, please?
Are
you referring to this one? This is the Airport Express line, and we're underneath that. I mean that's the line the way below our basement. several 10 meters deeper. Well, it will not affect our structure. We're just traversing the line. All the works and the foundation works will be done in a way to avoid any impact on it. And rest assured, we have engineers monitoring the works. We just want to give a simplified drawing for your information. We don't want to put in too much information, but in fact there is a set of stairs and escalators leading to the studio theater. This is just a perspective view, so that you understand that basically there is access to every part. So there will be indoor links. All right, thank you. So that wraps up the item. Item 4, any other business? About extending the work of the joint committee. The 12-month tenure of this joint subcommittee will expire on the 22nd of November. So I need to ask members whether we need to apply for an extension to the House Committee. We all agree, right? And if members also agree, the Secretariat will prepare a paper for the House Committee. And this paper will have to be endorsed by the Joint Subcommittee and the 2 panels. That is the Development Panel and the Home Affairs Panel. The paper will be issued to members in due course. I suggest that it may be done by circulation. Otherwise, the 2 panels will need to hold meetings respectively. But if necessary, we can have another meeting to discuss that paper. But if there is no objection here, I suggest that we circulate the paper for endorsement. Now, let's say if the House Committee approves the application to extend the subcommittee's work in November, the subcommittee can first extend its tenure by 3 months until the 22nd of February, and then we'll need to give the slot to other subcommittees on the waiting list. At present, there are 8 subcommittees, and this subcommittee will need to go back in the queue, and will need to wait until we have another available slot. So I'll see if we can discuss with other subcommittees. And we have had 2 meetings in this legislative year. The next meeting will be held after summer recess. The Secretariat will inform members in due course. And if there is nothing under AOB, then meeting's adjourned. No meeting before summer. I think the end of September or around that time, or October. All right, if there's nothing else under AOB, then meeting's adjourned. Thank you.